This is a Relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
Well, it's a haunting audio history for Danielle Smith. The biggest challenge right now is that it's her own words that are coming back to bite her. She wants to stay on as Alberta's premier, the leader of the United Conservative Party, but it's looking like a tougher and tougher task, as we'll talk about today on the show. Welcome to Real Talk. Ryan Jesperson here with John Hicks, Charles Adler joining us in just a moment, and then Athabasca University professor and podcaster Dr. Josie Auger will join me in studio for the second half of today's show. You've likely been seeing the coverage over the past day or so. Audio has surfaced, a podcast, a show that was hosted by Alberta's United Conservative Party leader. She's been premier, Danielle Smith, wherein she invokes the Holocaust, followers of Adolf Hitler, in the context of a conversation around vaccines. Even worse, she drags in the legacy of the poppy, drawing the ire in a very unusual circumstance of both B'nai B'rith, the Jewish advocacy group, and the Canadian Legion, Canada's veterans. It's a big mess. She's issued a statement. She says that she's always been a friend of the Jewish community and of Israel. Of course, her opponents not only releasing this audio themselves, but salivating at the prospect that this could be too high of a hill to climb. People like political columnist Graham Thompson are starting to wonder if even the Conservatives win this election on May 29th, is it possible that Danielle Smith could face a hostile caucus, a revolt, so to speak? Could her leadership be limited even with an electoral win on May 29th? We're going to get into that today. Plus, Canada expelling a Chinese diplomat. This after the family of Conservative MP Michael Chong was targeted, harassed. Now, the Canadian government waffled on this a little bit. You've heard from Minister Melanie Joly in days past, who said that, hey, we're weighing all of the implications. We're considering everything when it comes to ruffling China's feathers. But ultimately, it comes down to this. Canada's democracy must be protected. China already firing back, not literally, but a Canadian diplomat being named persona non grata in China. Charles Adler's going to chime in on that in just a second. This episode of Real Talk is presented by our friends at Danatech. I want to tell you a little bit about Danatech, a leader in the safety training space for over 30 years. Today, they're proud to count themselves among the foremost providers of online safety courses. Danatech blends deep cross-industry expertise with proprietary learning management system technology that's oftentimes referred to as LMS tech. It makes their courses stand out in the industry while creating an easy, seamless training experience for training managers and learners alike. If you need to keep your team safe and your business compliant, Danatech is your reliable safety training partner with a track record of trust. You can learn more today at danatech.com. Charles Adler in 1 minute. First, to set the table for this conversation, here's audio. This was from November of 2021. This is before Danielle Smith was leader of the UCP and, of course, premier. This was just after she walked away from her career in talk radio. She was in conversation with a man by the name of Andrew Royland, who's an entrepreneur, an investment advisor. And they were talking about his family's history coming out of Europe. Of course, the context of World War II, and, well, here's where Danielle Smith got herself into trouble.
I noticed you're not wearing a poppy, I'm not wearing a poppy, but they ruined it for me this year. The political leaders standing on their soapbox, pretending that they care about all the things that you just talked about, pretending they understand the sacrifice, and not understanding that their actions are exactly the actions that our brave men and women in uniform are fighting against. I don't know if you've had a chance to watch the Netflix series, How to Become a Tyrant, but it starts with Hitler in the first episode, and it's absolutely appalling and shocking how, and it's one academic says, I know so many people would say, and they must have filmed this before COVID. So many people say that they would not have succumbed to the charms of a tyrant, somebody telling them that they have all the answers. And he said, I guarantee you would. And that's the test here, is we've seen it. We have 75% of the public who say, not only hit me, but hit me harder, and keep me away from those dirty unvaxxed. And even on the cover of the Toronto Star, saying, I want people who are unvaxxed to get sick and die, and I don't even care. I don't want them to get treatment. We're already hearing about people being denied treatment for not being vaccinated, being taken off the organ donor list. What are we becoming? What are we becoming?
That's
So there it is. Charles Adler joins us every week here on Real Talk. Today he chimes in from Vancouver, BC. Charles, your thoughts when you first heard that clip? It's not the first clip that's gotten our former colleague in trouble. How bad is this one?
If you don't mind, let me just offer some personal context. Yesterday was an anniversary day. It was on May 8th in 1945 that my parents, and many other people, found out that they would not be murdered. That is to say, found out that the Nazi forces were surrendering. So this is a week where we talk about VE Day, victory over Europe. But to boil it right down to what matters most, my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, survived in a concentration camp. My paternal grandmother was murdered at Auschwitz. But my maternal grandmother told me that I should take every opportunity for the rest of my life to thank Canadian forces. That's what the poppy is about. To thank Canadian forces for her life, the lives of my parents, and therefore my own. For Danielle Smith to say that she's not wearing a poppy because she's not happy with Canadian government policy, there could not be a deeper insult. And I want to thank Don Braid, who I know watches these podcasts, for making sure that that was front and center. Yes, of course, talking about Hitler and followers, and we'll talk about that. That's the piece that gets the most amount of attention. But the most amount of my attention goes to the business of Danielle Smith politicizing the poppy and dumping on those who sacrificed, without whom so many of us would not even be alive. Thank you, Don Braid of the Calgary Herald.
Let me read this quick statement. This is from the Royal Canadian Legion. The poppy is a symbol of remembrance of those who have served Canada and made the supreme sacrifice in the name of democracy. It has no role in politics. The sacrifices made by those whom the poppy represents have safeguarded the rights and freedoms that Canadians enjoy today. Now, the Premier's office released a statement yesterday addressing this. She says, I've always been a friend of the Jewish community. She says, I've always been a friend of Israel. Of course, she pissed off Canadian veterans as well. So this is one that's coming on two fronts. And then the minute that journalists had a chance to ask her questions, you know that this is one of the ones that was going to be at the top of the list. And that was exactly the case. What you're going to hear first, the voice of a journalist from CTV Calgary. Here's the Premier, or the leader of the UCP, yesterday.
Through the first caller.
Thank you. First caller is Tyson Fedor, CTV Calgary.
Apologies here. I thought it was going to be a little later down here. But, Premier, I just want to ask you, you were vaccinated in Arizona. You and your husband operated a restaurant in High River at the time of the comments that have been circulating. You were following these so-called tyrannical measures set out by your predecessor, Jason Kenney, called the Restriction Exemption Program. So you have to ensure guests are vaccinated before dining. If you say vaccinated Albertans are followers of Hitler, would you include yourself as Premier as a follower of Hitler, and why didn't you stand up against those measures from Jason Kenney?
Well, I've issued a statement regarding my comments. I've always remained a friend to the Jewish community, to Israel, and to our veterans, and I would ask you to reach out to my office for a copy of my statement.
Is that going to fly, Charles? I mean, how damaging could this be, number one, to the campaign, number two, to Danielle Smith's political career?
Her comments, I call Lake of Hitler. There are many people outside of Alberta who don't understand what I'm talking about. I think everyone understands in Alberta when I refer to the Lake of Fire comment that got her into a massive amount of political trouble years ago. This is far worse than Lake of Fire. This is exponentially, monumentally worse. And so I call this her Lake of Hitler moment. If this isn't trouble, I don't know what is, because let's just look at the principle here. She is on the one hand saying that 3/4 of the people of Alberta are lemmings, are sheep, mindlessly following the government, which is a dictatorship. That's what she's saying. 3/4 of Alberta, and that means virtually everyone who's watching this and listening to this podcast are just mindless sheep. So that's what she thinks of the people. And I'm trying to weigh my words here because this is so serious. This phony, to use a German word, ersatz, false. This false grassroots politician with this ridiculously condescending attitude toward 3/4 of the public. So she's saying that 3/4 of the Alberta public are mindless sheep and for following orders, as it were. And now she's saying, let's just get past all this and focus on what I want to focus on. So I just have a trouble, just intellectually, this is so dishonest. She's saying that 3/4 of the people are sheep, but just move on, ignore this, and follow what I'm saying. So she's still treating them like sheep. If a public official in a democracy wants to tell the public that they are just mindless sheep, you followed one thing a couple of years ago, now you're to follow me. She's just, I hate to put it this way, but I don't know how else to put it. She's psychologically unfit to lead people in a democracy at any level, mayor, MLA, you name it. Ryan, she told you a number of years ago that she was unelectable. I think that when she said that to you, she had clarity. Right now, she doesn't, but the public has to. They cannot pretend that whatever she said 10 minutes before she became leader doesn't matter, that the only thing that matters is what's on the prompter now. And we also know this from doing podcasts ourselves. When you're podcasting and you're talking to the people who are followers, you're developing a personal connection with them. That's when you're telling your truths. The truth isn't on the teleprompter that she's reading today. The truth is what she was saying in that hideous audio in her Lake of Hitler moment.
Charles, let me give some folks the context. In the off chance that somebody doesn't listen to every single second of radio and podcast that you and I do together, but you and I and Danielle and many others were out in Toronto at that time, all of us employed by Global, by Chorus, covering the federal election in 2019. And the night before the election, a whole bunch of us were out for beers. You, me, Danielle, Supriya, Devetti was there. Brad Wall was there, former premier of Saskatchewan, a whole bunch of others. Farah Nasser, there was a bunch of people. And we were having some fun with our then radio colleague, Danielle Smith. She was hosting out of Calgary. I was hosting out of Edmonton. And I asked her, Brad Wall was there chuckling at the time. And I said, when are you going to run again? I said, when are you going to take another shot at becoming premier? And she laughed and referenced the floor crossing. And she said, I'm unelectable. And I don't know if she believed it at the time when she said it. And some people at the table went, "No, come on." And other people at the table just kind of nodded. And it was an interesting moment. It obviously stuck with me. It obviously stuck with you. But here's the thing is you have to wonder if maybe the people in her corner and the people that helped her win a leadership race that may have been an unlikely win at the beginning. I mean, I think some people are still wrapping their minds around how Travis Taves lost. As an aside, I mean, if I'm going to go off on a rant, I mean, where was Travis Taves' research team, by the way? Why wasn't Travis Taves' leadership team the one releasing all these videos, not the Alberta NDP? But I digress. A huge missed opportunity for the Taves camp. But that's not the point. I bet you a whole bunch of people got in her ear and said, "You're not unelectable. You may be unelectable to a certain group of people, but there's an entirely other group of people. There's a whole bunch of people that could probably carry you to victory. And if you want that to be the case, here's the tone you have to take. Here's the positions you have to hold. Here's the stuff you have to say." And there was this period of time from when she left Chorus Radio to right around the time she started seeking the leadership of the UCP, where she was releasing, these different shows and podcasts on different platforms. She did some work with Alberta Enterprise Group. People are finding these gems everywhere. I mean, it says a lot that it's her political opponents that are digging them up, not her political supporters. But it appears to me as though she started blatantly spelling out the exact types of positions that she knew would resonate with the grassroots fringe, and that is what it is, but there's enough of them to make noise in politics, and she pursued that vote in the goal, with the end goal of becoming electable again. And now I think, now that this is all being served up in front on a platter in front of the mainstream, this is why she's getting so badly damaged by it. I think that it was a misplay at the beginning to try to build a base of support, and now it could come back to bite her and haunt her when it comes to the general election. What do you think?
I think your dad is a general doctor, a general practitioner, and I think his son is a pathologist. I think you've just done a wonderful job as a coroner. You have done the autopsy. You've delivered the result. You've respected science. What you're giving us is the cold, hard facts of life, the cold, hard facts of a phony life of a person who thinks of 3/4 of the people as sheep, and she thought she could meet a number of sheep on the way back to active politics. And now she's just sitting there wondering how many people are still sheepishly going to follow her hypocrisy, her nonsense, and her Hitler of Lake of Hitler moment. And I don't mean to obsess about it, except that I don't know a single human being, Ryan, maybe you do, but in my personal life, I don't know a single human being who I respect who would say that if you are vaxxed and your parents are vaxxed and your family is vaxxed and the people following this are vaxxed, and we care about our children, we care about our health. If we care about all of those things, in other words, life itself, that makes us followers of Hitler. I'm not going to get past this.
Got some comments here online, interesting ones. Dennis, for example, says the problem is small town Alberta loves Conservatives no matter what they say, no matter what they do. They're going to vote Conservative for their oil and gas jobs. He says, look, as an example, in St. Albert, they just voted Michael Cooper, St. Albert's best politician, which is true, Charles. Lorne, invoking Ralph Klein, says you can shoot, shovel, and shut up your comments, but the trouble is that someone will dig them up. Now, here's the Premier's statement, and I wanted to read this. It's interesting. Yesterday, she says, as everyone knows, I was against the use of vaccine mandates during COVID. She can't deny it, so of course she's going to say that. As everybody knows, she's right about that. She goes on to say, however, the horrors of the Holocaust are without precedent, and no one should make any modern-day comparisons that minimize the experience of the Holocaust and suffering under Hitler, nor the sacrifice of our veterans. She goes on and on and on, but here's the thing I wanted to ask you about. She says, I apologize for any offensive language used regarding this issue made while on talk radio or podcasts during my previous career. You and I talked about this last week, right? About this UCP candidate in southern Alberta that said basically she wants to get ahead of an issue. And by the way, isn't it incredible how fast this news cycle is moving, that nobody even remembers that story from like 4 days ago? It's why people are going to want to make sure that they're paying attention to our podcast and YouTube archive. We've got all the issues covered. We're keeping up as best we can. But that candidate, to remind our audience, basically said, I want to apologize. She said, I didn't see myself having a career in politics, a front-facing career. Over the course of a number of different occasions, I'm paraphrasing, over the course of a number of occasions, I may have said things on social media, based out of ignorance. My paraphrase of what she said was, I've grown up, I've learned, I've met more people, and my positions on a lot of issues have changed, and I want to apologize for anything I've said that was offensive. And you and I and our audience debated on whether or not an apology like that flies. I heard Corey Hogan on The Strategist refer to it as a social media bankruptcy claim. In other words, you look back and you say, anything in the past is no longer an issue moving forward. I have declared social media bankruptcy. Now here the Premier, or I should say technically the leader of the UCP during the election, says, I want to apologize for any offensive language made while on talk radio or podcast during my previous career. I mean, that's a pretty significant chunk of time, pretty significant period of time. It is true. The job of a talk host is to be a provocateur. So how do you reconcile the two? And most importantly, this is what her team cares about. Will the public buy it?
Well, first of all, Ryan, it ain't bragging if you can do it. Both of us have a pretty solid track record in being provocateurs and building massive audiences and massive amounts of money for our employers. And just to be fair, they also compensated us very well. They compensated
you better
Danielle
than me,
Smith
Adler.
well.
You way better
All
than
right,
me.
Yeah, I'm a little bit older, just a tad. Here's the thing. I'm sorry. This to me is so laughable that she can pretend that she was one thing yesterday and she's another thing today because she's a provocateur. There are many ways of provoking people. There are many ways of provoking people into a conversation. Here, I'm going to say it. Danielle Smith, in terms of her basic intelligence, is high intel. Okay, she's other level. She's much smarter than the average. The idea that the only way that she can garner an audience to be a provocateur is to have these Lake of Hitler moments is absolutely ridiculous. Ryan, have you ever managed to build an audience without saying to 3/4 of them that they're sheepish followers of Hitler? I could go on and the other things that, dumping all over the poppy. There are so many different examples. I mean, all you have to do is go into Twitter, go into Facebook. It's legion. The amount of things that she has said. So the idea that all is to be forgiven with an apology read on the prompter is ridiculous. And besides, you and I have both agreed 1,000 times that conditional apologies are worthless. I apologize to you if you're offended at being called a Nazi or a Nazi follower. If you're offended by that, but what is that? I mean, in an ethics class, does that fly?
I mean, to me, this is they're in a real conundrum, Chuck. It's the exact same thing that we've talked about with every. I mean, you watch what Pierre Poilievre is doing right now, and he's quietly dialing some things back. Have you noticed? Right? He did what he had to do.
It's all on videotape. He's provided the Liberal Party.
Sure,
and they're in big trouble, especially with the story that we may or may not get to talk about. By the way, let me just throw this out there. Melanie Joly said last week that there are other factors. It's not just about you, she said to Michael Chong, this business of whether or not to throw out the guy who was threatening Michael Chong's family. Melanie Joly, this is from me to you. Canada's a real country. I know that you believe Canada's a real country, but Canada stops being a real country when it doesn't throw out sons of bitches who want to threaten our members of parliament or anybody else, whether you're an MP or anybody else, if you're a regular Canadian, anyone who comes into this country and threatens our people or threatens their families is out of here. There are no other factors. Real countries, serious countries, don't say, well, on the other hand, there's a bucket of wheat that we might not be able to sell China if we throw this bastard out. I'm sorry. Real countries don't do that.
Well, let's get into this, Charles, and we'll obviously leave this to our audience to let us know what they think about this story out of Alberta. We've got in our live chat right now, Linda wants to point out that I have omitted the last line. I mean, I feel like maybe I'm going a little bit easy on Danielle Smith, but if Linda wants me to sink my teeth into the next, this doesn't help her more, Linda. She says, Danielle said, I would hope we can all move on to talk about issues that currently matter to Albertans and their families. There are issues that matter to Albertans right now: inflation, healthcare, jobs, the economy. That all matters, obviously. And we do talk about that a lot. But it also matters to Albertans to know whether or not the elected leader of the province is going to leverage the poppy and decide whether or not to wear it based on how they're feeling at that moment in time about public health policy. That is a major point. That is an insight into leadership. That is what you would call a case study, Linda. And people want to know, is the leader of this province province is the premier of Alberta going to embarrass us in future when it comes to issues where there's broad consensus? I mean, the poppy is a big deal. If I can speak candidly about it for a second, you and I both worked in TV for a long time. I had a colleague, I won't mention their name, obviously, but I remember a number of years ago, a heated conversation with station management where the reporter insisted on wearing a white poppy on air. And the position of the TV station was, like hell, you're going to wear a white poppy. And the journalist made a compelling case. Well, I believe in peace, and I don't believe in war and conflict, and I want to stand up for my values, and the white poppy is an accepted symbol of peace. Doesn't matter. Station management didn't want to hear it. It didn't matter if there was a compelling case for it, because the statement was that when that broadcast went out to thousands of people with anything other than the red poppy, it was a hornet's nest for the station and its advertisers. I mean, it just goes to show the poppy represents something perhaps even more than what we realize. And that's why this is such a big deal. Chuck, let's talk about...
Brian, I can, the poppy business. But let me just be clear, because people say that sometimes I've got authoritarian instincts, and then maybe they've got a case. I mean, I had someone wanting to sit there with me during just days before Remembrance Day in the studio. The issue had nothing to do with Remembrance Day, but he was sitting there with a white poppy on, and I said, "Please remove the white poppy." And he said, "Well, it's my right to wear it." I said, "It is your right to wear it, but it's going to be very, very difficult for me to have any respect for you while I'm talking to you, as long as you wear the white poppy." He said the same thing. It was about peace. And I said, "Excuse me, there would be no peace. There would be no planet. You would not be able to be on this show. I would not be alive if it weren't for the red poppy." And I know that you don't understand that, sir, but with all due respect, if you do not remove the white poppy, you can remove yourself from this studio and go have your interview with someone else. Now, people can make their own judgments as to whether or not that was a fair thing for me to do or unfair. But that's how I feel about the poppy.
Chuck, I want to get you on the record with this before we thank you for your time in a move that perhaps shows Ottawa dragging its feet. Canada has officially expelled Chinese diplomat Zhao Wei. This is related to the story of Conservative MP Michael Chong's family being pressured and influenced. Obviously, whether or not or when the Prime Minister knew about this is becoming more and more relevant. This is a story that continues to be an issue for Justin Trudeau and the Liberals, and in what China is describing as a reciprocal countermeasure. Canadian diplomat Jennifer Lynn Lalonde has been declared persona non grata. She's got to leave Shanghai by May 13th. What is the number one thing that the average Canadian needs to be focusing on this story? What is the most relevant detail right now?
Most relevant thing for the average Canadian is that we are a real country and we take real actions when our people are threatened, no matter who threatens them. So whether it's a man with a gun who happens to be Canadian, or whether it's a man with the gun of the People's Republic of China who happens to be Chinese in our country, nobody is welcome on Canadian soil who wants to threaten our people or their families in any other country, including China. It's about time that Canada did this. It's too late politically, in my opinion. It's too late, but I'm glad that it was done. And the message to China is you can do what you want to do in China. You can't do it in Canada, and you can't be cold-bloodedly threatening the families of Canadians without consequences. And if it means that a bushel of wheat gets sold to some other country other than China, if you want to try to penalize us that way, that's fine. We've made bigger sacrifices. We talked about World War II earlier. No country among the Allies sacrificed more per capita than this country. This is a real country. We have a real heritage that we're proud of, and we don't go out of our way to threaten the families of Chinese people or any people. This is the promised land for the Adlers and millions of others. And if China doesn't get that, that's China's problem. I don't wish to make China's problem our problem.
That's Canadian common sense from Charles Adler, who joins us typically on Mondays, today on Tuesday, every week right here on Real Talk. Be well, my man.
Thank you, Brian.
This conversation was presented by Canada's longest-running nonfiction film festival. That's Northwest Fest. You can check them out online today, the full lineup at northwestfest.ca. It runs all the way through till May 14th. More than 24 feature films, including Only in Theaters, which is coming up screening on Wednesday afternoon. If you're listening to us live, or today on Tuesday, that's tomorrow. Coming up, we spoke with Raphael Smarge, the director. It's the family fight to save a legendary Los Angeles cinema. A wonderful story. It's Only in Theaters. Real Talk Patreon supporters, check your email. You've got a promo code to go check out that film for free. Now, you can also stick around and join for the Rainbow Visions Film Festival, which for the first time is running alongside Northwest Fest, which is a great opportunity. It starts May 12th, also at Metro Cinema. You can find all the details again at northwestfest.ca. And don't miss our conversation coming up on Friday with filmmaker and wonderful friend of this show, Omar Mualim. He's going to talk to us about his film, The Lebanese Burger Mafia. That's going to be closing out Northwest Fest coming up this weekend. Again, northwestfest.ca. Hey, is it time to treat yourself to a little organization? Are you looking to maybe sort of dampen the chaos on the home front? Can we recommend you take a couple of seconds today and check out californiaclosets.ca? Now, everybody knows California Closets for the bedrooms and the workspaces and the living areas, and for good reason. I mean, the designs are incredible, more functional than you could possibly imagine, and more affordable than you might think. But I want to put California Closets Garage on your radar. You can find them on the website. Of course, they're doing a whole bunch of different stuff like storage cabinets and workbenches, but the beauty of working with California Closets, it's all custom. The garage is the workhorse of the home, so why not make it work a little harder for you? Get a free consultation today at californiaclosets.ca. Had a chance just a few days ago to grab lunch with the Monsma family. They're really incredible friends of Real Talk, and they are the family behind Grand Dog Essentials quality raw food. Had a chance to learn a little bit more about the family's history in business. This thing started small, and it's growing and growing and growing. Hundreds of families across the province, in particular Calgary, Edmonton, and Central Alberta, trusting Grand Dog Essentials quality raw food to keep their beloved furry four-legged family members healthy. You know, this is the time of year where we start finding your pups maybe itching, biting at their paws. A lot of people look at the food being the cause, but it's possible that environmental allergies could be the culprit. That's why I want to tell you about their 4-leaf rover allergy bundle. You can find it online. You go to the Shop Now link at granddog.ca for details. Also, be sure to check out their blog with great information like how to manage your dog's weight with a raw dog food diet. The promo code REALTALK knocks 10% off your first order delivered to your door at granddog.ca. Our friends at Kubi Renewable Energy are hiring, and they want to make sure that you know that. If you have a goal to help Canada achieve its sustainable energy targets, if you would love to see a career start to build in front of your very eyes in green tech and green energy, take 2 seconds to check out kubienergy.ca today. They're Tesla certified. They're working across the prairie provinces, and they're also partnering with Women Building Futures. This is an awesome program that specifically offers support for unemployed and underemployed women in connecting to careers that pay above a living wage. You can find the details at kubienergy.ca. And if you haven't yet made plans for Mother's Day, you know that Sunday is coming up. We don't want you to be caught without a plan. Take 2 seconds to check out the all-you-can-eat Mother's Day brunch at the Friesen Brothers Fresh Market locations. On May 13th and 14th, enjoy an all-you-can-eat brunch buffet featuring the absolute best of Friesen Brothers' delicious treats. Every mom in attendance will receive a beautiful flower to make the day extra special. All of this available for just $25 per person. You can make Mother's Day a memorable one at your local Friesen Brothers. You can find out more details at friesen.com. That's FRESON.com. We've been looking forward to this conversation for quite some time. You know, every once in a while, you meet somebody that has a wealth of experience in life and in education and in storytelling. And that's certainly the case with our next guest. Dr. Josie Auger is an associate professor in the Center of Interdisciplinary Studies in the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences at Athabasca University. Her current fields of study include Indigenous studies, and she recently completed an 8-part podcast series entitled Kikapekiskwewin. We're going to have you audit my pronunciation there, focusing on why cultural values are so imperative and important to Indigenous peoples involved in research. Thank you for joining us in studio today. Good morning. Did I do okay here? We'll just get you to hit that button there to turn your mic on. There we go. Did I do okay on the pronunciation?
Absolutely.
What does that mean?
So kikapekiskwewin is a Cree word that means to have a future conversation. And so at the time when we were writing up a proposal for SSHRC and having support from Athabasca University, a group of us, Myra Tate, Carolyn Green, and Dr. Nisha Nath, also we wrote the proposal, which included having a 2-day hybrid event. And this was last June in the town of Athabasca at the multiplex. So it was really awesome. And we brought in people from Australia, New Zealand, and of course across Canada for this 2-day hybrid event. And they talked about, cultural values and the significance of that within Indigenous research and Indigenous research methodologies. So we ended up having the 2-day hybrid event, and from there we asked people if they would like to participate in podcasts. And so at the time we thought Kikapekiskwewin would be a great way in which we could, have a future conversation about the significance of our cultural values.
Now, I know you're all about storytelling, and I'm all about storytelling. So can I ask you about what you have in front of you on the table here in studio? Would that be okay?
Sure.
And I wonder if especially for the people that are listening on our podcast that don't have the benefit of perhaps seeing it on YouTube, you have a candle, you've got some tobacco. Can you tell us about this?
Sure. So I don't want to mislead anybody like in this conversation that we're having. And certainly like if I'm sharing information, I always include tobacco. Tobacco is sacred. We don't necessarily smoke all the tobacco. The tobacco is used for different things like offerings and whatnot. And so it's a plant that we use and respect, that we believe is one of the first plants put here, and that the Creator put here for us to use in this particular way. So we use it as an offering. Also, the water here that we have on the table is, signifies to me the importance of kindness in our conversation. And the flame of the candle represents the honesty to come forward and to be able to share. And this rock that I'm holding, really connects us back to the earth and the minerals provided within the earth, and just to be caring for that. And we have all of this wonderful, air to breathe in, and that brings us to this place of strength and determination to be able to move forward. So to me, when we come from this place of doing Indigenous research, it's really grounded in our values and our cultural values, and it's really deep, and it's kind of hard to get into, in a short podcast. But essentially, these cultural values are really important when we're involved in research with Indigenous communities.
I don't know if I've heard kindness mentioned as a value in conversation at any point in the last 10 years, to be honest with you. I'm not talking in the context of Indigenous research. I'm saying just generally. I wonder, as a matter of fact, and I lament the fact that I think I see evidence from time to time that we've lost our priority of ensuring that kindness, or maybe open-mindedness, or maybe empathy is a part of conversations that we share. Have you noticed that? I mean, society in general, or am I just being pessimistic?
Well, I think each and every day we give thanks for, having a good future, having a good day, and to be able to do so in this way. So kindness really is important. And I think, yes, you're right, that there's a lot of injustices within the world. Missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls is also part of that. And I want to talk just a little bit about that. Please. Because I used to be on council for Big Stone Cree Nation from 2014 to 2018. And during that time, that's when they called the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. And of course, that social justice issue is ongoing. And of course, that hit close to home for me as well, within the community and prior. When you lose a loved one, I was listening to Charles Adler in the green room. When you lose a loved one, the significance of symbols are really important. And so I wanted to kind of like share also to us as Indigenous people, as Cree people, Nihiawak, that these are symbols that are also important to us. So when the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls call to National Inquiry was called to action, and my term had ended for Big Stone Cree Nation, I was hired at Athabasca University, and I read a book entitled Conquest, and there it kind of like spurred me to use my research incentive grant from Athabasca University to be able to talk about like the invasion of sexual boundaries. Why would I talk about that? Because I wanted to know, can we have healthy self-determination if we have not self-determined like our sexual boundaries? And what would that look like? So we engaged in this research, and I did, and I met with 5 Indigenous women, Cree women, and they referred other Indigenous Cree women into this research project as well. But I had to go through like a research ethics board process at the university, and sometimes like it's because we don't know what we don't know, and if we haven't grown up like with our culture or haven't relearned our culture, or mainstream institutions don't understand our culture, it becomes difficult to approve something, which is why we ended up talking about this podcast on one of these podcast series. And during this 2-day event, we invited people from all over. So one of the questions was about involved if we had parallel pathways where we have like Indigenous research ethics boards on one side and also non-Indigenous post-secondary institutions on the other side, how are we going to meet? How are we going to cross? If we were to imagine it like a riverbank, if we have two sides, how are we going to cross? How are we going to intersect? How are we going to learn? But on the other side, if you don't understand, like, I guess, like on Indigenous teachings, and if Indigenous researchers want to like engage like in ceremony with their with the people that they're involved in research with, then it's difficult for, like, I think a non-Indigenous institution to really understand that process or the significance of that, because you get into issues of like, well, your research could be biased. You're not a distant,
Sure.
Kind of like third part. You're not a distantly removed from the subject matter. You're fully engaged. But on the other side, like with Indigenous research, it's all about relationality. Relationality means that, say, if I'm going to be talking to somebody like about the invasion of sexual boundaries, this is that's a very concerning topic. It's a concerning topic, and so you want to be able to relate to that person. You want to be able to respect their experience. You want to be able to be responsible in a way that these ethical issues should be addressed. So part of what I did was that I asked them how, if you were triggered, is there something that you would like to do? Would you like to see like a therapist? Would you like to see an elder? What would you like to do? So it was up to them to decide if that happened. And all the time they talked about it, they identified that they would have, someone that they could go to, that they could talk to, that they felt comfortable with that as well. And also the importance of anonymity was discussed, like from the post-secondary institution side. They kind of wanted to ensure, like, are the people that you're going to be talking to, do they want to remain anonymous, and how are you going to address that? So that was one issue, and plus the honorarium issue that I provided, because in our way of relating to our communities, we generally provide like an honorarium for engaging. It's that reciprocity.
Right.
Just like this tobacco here, this is reciprocity. Like I'm going to put this tobacco out after we talk, and I'm going to give that back to the earth because in my belief system that these things are helping me have this conversation. So hopefully that, the listeners out there have a kind of an idea of what I'm trying to get at.
Can I say, I hope it's okay that I'm pointing this out. I notice things in front of me, and they occur to me to be significant. You've held the stone in your hand in a closed. Not if I say a closed fist, it makes it sound aggressive. But you have it you have the stone resting in the palm of your hand for the entirety of our conversation. You've been holding it. You have your hand closed on loose tobacco. You've been holding it in your hand the entire time we're speaking, and I don't think I've ever seen that before.
This is a practice that I do, and thank you for noticing that. But yeah, no, I like to hold on to these because they give me a sense of purpose. As an Indigenous woman, and as I get older, our work is never completed, and we have to continue to pass on our traditional knowledge to our family members. And if our community members would like to know too, then we share that with them. Our roles are never completed. We just continue to do more work.
I've posted a link to your podcast in the live chat, and for anybody that's listening or watching this later on YouTube, you'll find it in the show notes. It's a series of 8 episodes that include Indigenous and non-Indigenous people from academia, from research ethics boards, Indigenous cultural practitioners, and a graduate student.
Yes.
What was the process like bringing these different people together from different backgrounds? Did you must have seen not just sharing of experience and ideas, but also some learning happening along the way. I mean, you must have seen it happening right in front of you.
Absolutely. So, originally, it was a few of us that were writing the Sure Connection grant, and then we included, there was 4 of us writing this Sure Connection grant. Myra Tate was also part of this, Carolyn Green and Nisha Nath and myself. And we used the funding that we received, and we hired a graduate student, Michaela Lassan, who works out of Rupert's Land, the Métis Center of Excellence. And she provides her experience, the graduate student experience in episode 8. We also have David Powell and Tracy Powell, actually. They've been so instrumental in helping me get these podcasts off the ground, and they're from the Athabasca County area. And so we talked about parallel pathways and about the impetus for this research on sexual violation with Indigenous women. So I had that conversation with David, and that's in episode 7. Other episodes include talking to Dr. Tiffany Preet, who's with the University of Lethbridge in the Department of Sociology, and she talks about beadworking as an Indigenous research method. And we interviewed members of our own Athabasca University Research Ethics Board to have this conversation about where do we go from here, how and the significance of building relationships with research ethics boards to continue that. And we also talked to Dr. Susan Manitowabi, who is from Laurentian University, but she is an Anishinaabe, an Indigenous woman, and she talked about their community's First Nations Research Ethics Board. So this was actually implemented 20 years ago. So it's nice to see.
With success?
With success. And so there's respect on both sides. So that river or the parallel pathways, they do once in a while intersect, but really the community or the nation has a say-so. They make recommendations to the Chief and Council, and the Chief and Council will then give that research approval. Or not, yeah.
I'm so grateful for you being here, by the way, and I hope that I just feel like there's a million things I could ask you about, and so I hope that I'm taking these in the right directions. Please feel free to take the conversation wherever you like, but you've talked about some very significant things and some very heavy subject matter.
Yes.
I mean, the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in Canada. I mean, a national inquiry, sure. But you could make a very compelling argument, and many First Nations do, that the country really isn't doing anything about it, that this is not being treated as seriously as it needs to be treated. To put it crudely, but probably accurately, if it was white women disappearing from affluent suburbs, this would probably be treated very differently in the country. So how is the nation doing in your assessment? I'm talking the country of Canada right now. And what's the number one thing you would like this audience to consider in the context of this?
Brilliant question. Thank you so much for that. So in terms of what I would like to see is I'd like to see a multi-juridical legal society. I think, and what that basically means is that we have like the common law, we have the civil law, but we also need like a third order, like Indigenous legal orders. Dr. John Burroughs identifies the importance and the significance of having this. And basically, having an Indigenous legal order would help us to bring in like the significance of our natural laws, our sacred laws, like, teachings about like our tobacco, the water, the fire, the air that we breathe, the 7 sacred teachings that include, wisdom, honesty, respect, love, truth, humility, and I think I said honesty and truth. Yeah. So those ones, the 7 sacred teachings, are really important. He writes a lot about them. And I think that this would be really important for us to be able to address injustices that happen to Indigenous peoples if we had our own Indigenous legal system eventually one day. And, doing research that I have with Indigenous women, I'm going to go back to writing more about the results because I kind of meandered off into this ethics pathway. But I do want to get back to talking about, healing, and the people that were involved in the research were already like on a healing path, and they were also involved in practicing their Indigenous culture and traditions. So they were well on their way, and they were willing and open to talk about it. And I think it's really important to talk about the importance of healing at many different levels of society.
We've had so many knowledgeable people on this show make the very valid and good point, the important point that truth and reconciliation needs to start with truth. It may sound obvious to say it, but it's not that obvious to a lot of us. And I think that's why, well, number one, I know for a fact that's why on this show, for example, conversations like this are extremely important to us. And in the pursuit of truth or knowledge or understanding of history and cultural traditions, a podcast like yours is such a valuable resource, not just for Indigenous people, obviously, arguably more so for non-Indigenous people. How is this country doing in the pursuit of the understanding, a deep understanding of the truth of not just the history of Canada, but the history of this land before Canada? How are we doing collectively in your assessment?
Well, my comment to that is it's lifelong learning. It's really important because we don't know everything. We cannot know everything about every single possible thing. But I do think that, moving forward, that we have to recognize that, for instance, like even the Indian Act, which was enacted in 1876, that's been roughly about 7 generations since that happened. And that effect of colonialism has had devastating impacts on Indigenous people. And it's going to take time. Like, truth is like the whole picture. We can honestly share our own experiences, but the wider truth is like including more people. Like, there's more voices that need to talk about like the incidences that have happened. We've had apologies, and the apologies are a starting place. We also need to look at the systemic factors and the ways in which that we can change these. And for me, it's bringing in like our natural laws, our sacred laws for healing, because it's not just for like a justice system, the foundations of a justice system, but also like it's everything. It's holistic, and it includes like our healing and how we can help ourselves to, become the self-actualized human beings and connected to our land, language, and culture.
There's like a shared history of I suppose everyone on planet Earth, and then there are of course histories within that. Histories of culture, histories of people groups, histories of nations. And it's been very interesting. I want to use 2 examples here, and I'm not necessarily saying that the 2 have anything to do with one another. But as we've looked at cultural traditions over the past few years, 2 incidents or 2 occurrences, 2 realities occur to me. Number one is these horrific discoveries of unmarked graves, and not discoveries, let me say reminders of unmarked graves outside so many former residential schools, the sites of so many former residential schools, starting with the 215 in Kamloops. And we've heard some people assert that they're going to wait. They're kind of like in the biblical story, they're like the Thomas that needed the physical proof before they take something seriously. They're suggesting that these graves should be unearthed, that they should be dug up. And of course, we've also talked to many Indigenous leaders that have said, well, that is a nation-by-nation decision on how that will be navigated or how that will be handled. There's a sensitive history there for obvious reasons. And then there are doubters in the public that say, where's the evidence? Where's the proof? Another story. I'm not comparing this to residential schools. However, there's a project, an infrastructure project that's been proposed in the city of Edmonton. I'm sure you're aware of it, this Prairie Sky gondola that people wanted to build. Now, the only problem was one of the gondola stations was slated to be right by the Epcor power plant, which happens to be a very significant cultural spot, a burial location for Indigenous communities that have been here for millennia. For thousands of years. And I think as a casual observer, it's safe to say that gondola right now is probably a non-starter based on the fact that land right there is so significant to people that have used this as a gathering place for thousands of years. There seems to be a very strong awareness among Indigenous people about the cultural and historical significance of some of these lands. But among the greater public, there's not that shared understanding yet. How do we get there? Can we get there?
I think so. And I have hope. I always have hope in relationality between Indigenous people and non-Indigenous people. I think that there's hope. There's always hope. I like to, think about treaty federalism. We are not stakeholders. We are rights holders. And when I think about treaty federalism, I think about the work of other Indigenous scholars, and they talk about the importance of recognizing that Canada wouldn't be a country if it wasn't for the treaties being signed. So if the treaties were signed and they're based on natural law and sacred law, that should be coming first and foremost. I know that some people will of course strongly disagree with that. But then I say it's lifelong learning, and it's about understanding the significance of renewed treaty conversations with Indigenous people and recognizing, the tragedy of the residential schools, the genocide, the cultural genocide within the residential schools, and the effects that that's had on generations of people, families, communities, not knowing that their families were, the significance of families being torn apart, and not knowing lost loved ones, or not knowing that they would have had an auntie or a sister or somebody, or a brother or an uncle, and what that would have looked like, and how that would have contributed to their family and their overall wellness and community wellness. So we have a lot of healing to do, and this is one way that I believe that helps people who are willing heal.
I'm so grateful that you continue to use that natural history focus, and I've always, just as a white guy, if I can put it casually, I've even found beauty in the language of the treaties. You look at the language of the treaties, the promises that were made to last as long as the sun shines, the grass grows, and rivers flow.
Yes. And
you don't see typical contracts written up like that. They're very unique promises in a spirit that I think that most of us could use a reminder around every once in a while.
I think it's really important to recognize that Indigenous women also have had a significant role in those conversations, albeit that they weren't at, say, those ceremonies that were conducted between, I'll say, non-Indigenous men and, Indigenous men. So they weren't part of that, but there's documentation and oral history in and around the role that Indigenous women played, and how Indigenous women have been revered because of their gender, and because they're life givers, and that significance and connection to the earth is also very much grounded in our belief systems.
So where do you go from here?
Where do I go from here? Well, first of all, I'm going to go put this tobacco out.
Can you is that personal, or can you give us some insight into how you will do that? Into the process.
I just put it to the earth. I give thanks. I give thanks for the day. I give thanks for having this conversation here with you, and also in your beautiful studio. And I just give thanks and put it out to the earth. So that's what I'll be doing. And I guess continue on with writing. I have a bit of annual research leave coming up, and I'm hoping to get some writing done.
Amazing. I feel like I made a new friend here, and we're so grateful for the expertise that you've shared with us, and it really is remarkable. Your project, kikapekiskwewin, people can check out the link in the show notes on the podcast and on YouTube if they'd like to check out the project. And I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you.
This is really. Can I embarrass you a little bit for a second? Can I read some praise for you in our live chat?
Wow.
There was something I love doing this to. Can I say, like, Tracy says, this lovely lady shines with her knowledge of both historical and current events. Tracy says, this interview made my week.
Awesome.
That from Tracy, who's listening. What about this one? I saw another one which was amazing. People were talking about your spirit, which I loved. I mean, there's just too many comments. Shoot, there's too many comments. I can't scroll back far enough to find where somebody said, but just talking about basically your vibe and what you give off, and the fact that I think that you're going to make this understanding and this knowledge so approachable for people, which is obviously a huge credit to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's Dr. Josie Auger. Again, you can check out the podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll link to it in our show notes. This conversation has been presented by, as you might imagine, our great friends at Athabasca University. I mean, we've been reminded here about the role that Athabasca is playing when it comes to research in Canada, one of Canada's leading research institutions. And you can learn more about what a post-secondary experience at Athabasca can look like. Find out how AU works and your programs and courses at athabascau.ca. The best part about studying at Athabasca University, their world-class accredited online programs and courses are designed to offer you the flexibility to learn at your own pace on a schedule that suits your lifestyle. Check them out today at athabascau.ca. If you're looking for a plan to make Mother's Day, that is, coming up on Sunday, as sweet as you possibly can we suggest a visit to the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park? You'll find them in Palisades, Nemeo, Newcastle, Westmount, and Baseline Road. Give Mom the sweetest gift. That's a Mother's Day cake. You can order now online, or you can just go check out the selection in store. This is the moment of sweet celebration brought together with that signature fudge and crunch center surrounded by their world-famous soft serve. It's time to celebrate your mom and reflect on sweet memories while creating a new tradition at the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. Are you envisioning a transformation this spring? I'm talking in your outdoor space, your biggest investment, your home. May we suggest a quick call or an in-person visit with the team at Eden Landscaping? You can find them online at landscapeedmonton.ca, and that's where you can check out, the portfolio is a great reference point to see the finished projects, right? You can see photos of what they've done, or you can start to use your own imagination and check out their services. Whatever your vision is, they'll execute it with precise attention to detail. Full service landscaping from excavation all the way through to finished project. That could include edible garden boxes. Hey, maybe you run a gas line out to your garage, put it on a thermostat, so by the time that autumn hits, you're ready to enjoy that warmth and consistency every morning in your vehicle. Imagine not having to idle your vehicle every morning. Help the planet, help yourself. An experience working with paving stone, wood, concrete, tile, and steel to construct hardscapes like outdoor flooring and more. It's all part of what Eden Landscaping offers. Again, you can find them online at landscapeedmonton.ca. This is a call out to professional engineers across Canada, including recent graduates. I mean, we're going to have a whole new crop of bright young talent graduating from engineering schools like Alberta, of course, BC, Saskatchewan, and across the country. Apex Automation wants to hear from you. They're hiring right now. Their main expertise, industrial control systems engineering and software development solutions for any industrial process. Yeah, that's right. Whether it's natural gas, chemical manufacturing, robotics, material handling like overhead cranes or conveyor belts, pipelines, upstream oil extraction facilities, you name it. There's a bright career that lies in wait for you. If you want to work somewhere where they put their people ahead of profits, check out apexautomation.ca. Johnny, we always love when a guest like Dr. Auger mentions our studio. Really appreciate that. She's right, it is a beautiful studio, and that's thanks to the team at Complete Care Restoration. When we took this place over, it was fine. It was all right.
It was okay.
But it wasn't spectacular. There was a water leak in an area and, of course, some soundproofing that had to be done. And we put our tall order in front of the team at Complete Care Restoration, and they nailed it. Like, I'm not talking they came close. They did a decent job. I'm saying they nailed it. Now, they do construction and renovation. They also do, as the name would suggest, restoration. So, I mean, if you encounter that nightmare, a spring shower brings a basement flood, let's say the nightmare unfolds and you experience a fire in your garage or your kitchen, maybe you need work done and you need to trust the team that's doing it. Take our recommendation with 2 thumbs up and check them out online at completecarerestoration.ca. And a quick reminder that Friday's going to be here before you know it, and that means another episode, another edition of Trash Talk that's presented by our friends at Local Environmental Services. If you're in Alberta or Saskatchewan and you're a decision maker, whether that's for a small business, a big business, or an entire community, Local Environmental Services is your full-service environmental solutions partner. They have a ton of different ways that they can help you, and it's going to work with your budget, too. They love to compete for your business, especially if you're currently with one of those big multinational companies. Whether it's front-load bins, roll-off bins, recycling, landfill, water hauling, vacuum trucks, or more, check out localenvironmental.ca today. Now, we've got a lot of ground to cover, and of course, right at the top of our to-do list is the continuing storylines of the Alberta election. That's where we'll go back to on tomorrow's Real Talk. Coming up on Thursday, circle your calendars. Public Safety Minister Bill Blair will join us. I want to ask him about today's report in the National Post that suggests that the Liberals' Safe Supply Initiative is a big fail on the opioid epidemic front. We'll get the details on that. Coming up Friday, filmmaker Omar Muallim on the Lebanese burger mafia, and it sounds like we'll be sitting down with a pretty high-profile guest. We'll see.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Brandy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harman Candola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjesperson.com.